All right, so thank you so much for joining us today. I am Danielle Black, an account executive with Cragen and Pike. As many of you are aware, the cyber-related incidents have been accelerating at unprecedented levels. 2020 brought a variety of challenges to us all, but it also brought an influx of cyber-related incidents. Ransomware attacks alone saw a 485% increase. This is why it is so important to be having proactive conversations about cyber liability, what qualifies you for an insurance program, and what you should be doing to protect your business. On the webinar with me today are Tom Mahoney and Ryan Apgar with Socius. Socius and Cragen and Pike have a long-standing partnership on specialty insurance placements, cyber liability being one of them. Also joining us today is Sean Connery with Orbis Solutions. Sean is the president of Orbis Solutions and has an extensive background implementing cybersecurity and tech solutions for a variety of clients. Sean has also authored 2 #1 books, Under Attack and You Are the Target. Sean is CISSP certified, accredited through Stanford Cybersecurity Management, Microsoft Certified Systems Engineered, and is the winner of an XP for Cybersecurity Today, as seen on ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox. Ryan, I'll let you go ahead and get us started.
Great. Thank you, Danielle, and thanks everyone for joining. So just to dive in here quickly, there's a number of items we want to cover and discuss at length with you all, and impart some further knowledge as it relates to cyber and more specifically ransomware, and dealing with that both on the insurance side, but also on the front lines from your overall IT perspective. So first and foremost, we'll take a look at what a contemporary cyber policy looks like, the different coverages found therein, how those are structured. Separately, dive into some claim trends, again, specifically focusing on ransomware, because that is the focal point for most these days. And then finally, Sean will bring us home with the most expert opinion and insights possible on how to navigate this overall landscape and exposure. So looking at a contemporary cyber policy, they're most often broken down into 2 segments, one being third-party coverage and one being first-party coverage. Third-party coverage is your liability as it relates to network security, privacy. It extends to media liability, and then any regulatory action associated to a privacy event itself. These are the situations in where an event has occurred and a third party is alleging financial loss, and that you, the insured, are at fault for said wrongdoing that led to the event itself. Obviously, those transpire long after the event. It takes some time to bring litigation for such. So it's a more tailed exposure that occurs later down the line of the overall timeline of a cyber loss. The first party coverage is really where the rubber meets the road, and the driving force and factor for most buyers that are looking at utilizing an insurance policy as a financial vehicle to mitigate this loss. And within that, there's various insuring subsections and coverages that you find. Most notably, the breach response cost, as you'll see, is the first one on there. That is your ultimate triage component of the actual policy. That's where the carrier will appoint a breach coach to help quarterback the process, work in tandem with your forensic folks or IT folks that you have on your side, bringing in outside forensic vendors as needed, and engaging legal professionals on the privacy side for any privacy notifications to potentially affected individuals. Further from that, there's hacker damage, which is data restoration or system restoration following a cyber event, PCI fines for those that collect payment cards, and then cybercrime social engineering is most notably tied to fraudulent wires or social engineering attacks to compromise your overall financial institutions' logins, credentials, and steal money at day's end. Business interruption is pretty self-explanatory. The downtime that you experience during and following a cyber attack or event itself, and then the also tailed exposure of reputational harm. The final point there you'll see here is cyber extortion, and this is the clear focus for all underwriters, for insureds, IT professionals alike. This is based on current claim trends, as Danielle noted, that are skyrocketing, both from a frequency and severity standpoint. So with that, we'll dive into a little more specifics as it relates to the marketplace, the trends we're seeing on the claim side, et cetera. So one of the biggest impacts that we've seen in this acceleration of the current hard market we're finding ourselves in the cyber marketplace is arising from COVID and a redistribution or restructuring of a lot of corporations and companies' IT footprints and overall networks themselves, most notably attributed to the transition to a remote workforce. With that, you're seeing that there's an increased connectivity to overall networks for the company, increased access to data, which is obviously creating increased exposure. For every new access point to your network and sensitive data, there's another avenue for a bad actor to garner access to such and compromise your overall operations. Separately, a lot of the folks that are moving to or already have moved to a remote workforce are doing so on personal computers or devices that haven't been vetted, monitored, and ultimately scrutinized by the IT professionals within the organization at large. And then finally, the sheer rapid development of COVID and all these byproduct and factors were really catching a lot of IT teams off guard, who are obviously operating with their own identified budgets for any calendar year, and they were scrambling for the most part to reconcile how to address this remote workforce setup and overall exposure base associated to it. So some key statistics to support this and these factors that are driving the claims trends through the roof, again, from a frequency and severity standpoint, are those that are most generally associated or called cybercrime. And that is, as noted there, ransomware, funds transfer fraud loss, and then business email compromise. And you'll note here on the final point, just to drive it home, the FBI has reported a 3% increase in reported cyber crimes since the advent and start of COVID and this new landscape we all operate in on a remote workforce standpoint. So diving deeper, as noted earlier, ransomware is the biggest concern for insureds, for IT professionals, and for the underwriters alike. And that is due to some of the statistics that you do see here, in that it is increasing as noted, but also just the sheer application of a ransomware loss towards an organization and the cost you bear in trying to respond to such, and ultimately how an insurance policy will respond. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from the insurance perspective is that a ransomware claim actually doesn't limit itself to one individual coverage within the overall policy, and it can actually expand beyond to multiple insuring agreements. So in the event that a ransomware event does occur for an organization, at that time, you're engaging a multitude of different vendors and access points for the policy, and therefore triggering different portions of coverage, all of which are incurring their own respective costs associated to triaging that event. As we noted before, you're contacting the breach coach to quarterback the process, the forensic specialists that are working on your behalf via the carrier, the legal professionals, et cetera. And then the ultimate payouts on the other end of it, once you've triaged it and are trying to rectify the situation, in paying data restoration costs to get your systems or data back up and running, the business and income loss that you experience, and the long-term tail of liability or reputational harm itself. And all of that isn't even encompassing the ultimate ransomware demand and payment that could be covered under the insurance policy as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Tom, who will dive in a bit more to ransomware specifically, again, just because this is where the rubber meets the road and most claims are arising from.
So cyber and ransomware has definitely found its way into the news. Everyone's, unless you're living under a rock, probably saw either the Colonial Pipeline $4.5 million payout, the JBS meat processing $11 million payout, and in the insurance world, CNA, one of our insurance carriers, had a $40 million payout to regain control of its network back in March. And while these make large headlines and make for good news, the impact of all these significant ransomware increases, it's really affecting the small businesses of the world. And the takeaways in this slide are very, very clear that ransomware attacks are increasing dramatically in both frequency and severity. So what that's leading to is the insurance carriers reviewing where these attacks are coming from and what's being affected. So these bad actors are using threat vectors for RDP ports. And in doing so, when they get in, they're able to actually affect the backups, which leads to where underwriters are really beginning to scrutinize the cyber applicant security and controls and diving in on their cyber hygiene. With these dramatic payouts, we're seeing changes on the insurance side in a very, very rapid fashion. The cost of getting cyber insurance has gone through the roof. The limit and capacity from individual carriers is being closely monitored and heavily controlled. And on the underwriting side, because the backups are being controlled and they're starting to understand where these attacks are coming from, you're going to see a lot of additional questions when applying for insurance in the form of ransomware supplementals. As you go through the process, you'll get very familiar with the phrase multi-factor authentication, various verification controls, and how your backups are set up, and then further employee education. So this is a great transition to Sean here, who is a partner and a great guide for setting up your business to improve their cyber hygiene.
Today, we're going to be talking about how to make sure your insurance covers a ransomware event, and more importantly, how to avoid one in the first place. First, why the heck do you care what I have to say? Our security team has audited over 2,000 networks in the last 12 months, and I can tell you where people are going wrong when it comes to protecting themselves and being able to make sure their insurance policy covers the attack. Before we go too far along, I know some of you are thinking yourself, I'm running a small company and I don't need ransomware insurance. Why do you think you never see small businesses in the news with ransomware locking up all of their data and keeping them from using their computers? Well, it does happen. A couple of weeks ago, our security team helped a small law firm. I actually call them a micro law firm, and they had to recover from a ransomware event. They had 2 computers and some data in the cloud. That was it. And they still ended up being down for 7 days and ended up paying the ransom. This is happening to all sorts of businesses, from small businesses, big businesses, businesses in the cloud, businesses with servers, even businesses that don't think they need their data. And the worst part, they're all having to pay the ransom. So what can you do? Simple, transfer the risk to an insurance company, right? This is not covered by your normal business interruption insurance. Here's the thing. As you can imagine, the insurance companies are not enjoying all of these ransomware payments. So what can they do about it? They are assessing their clients' networks and denying claims. What are you going to do to address this? They are asking questions to understand what you have in place. These questions are getting harder, and this is where the biggest mistakes are coming in. What are they looking for? We're going to go through the top 5 questions, and if you can't answer yes to these, you not only have a problem when it comes to getting your insurance renewal, you're putting your livelihood and reputation at risk. What are the 5 things business owners are getting wrong? They just answer yes to these 5 questions rather than checking with their IT team, or even worse, lying about it. This is like getting a health insurance and having a pre-existing condition and not telling them about it. Okay, I'm going to go through and show you how you can check each of these yourselves and give you a way to make sure that you have all of the controls in place to make sure you're eligible for cyber insurance and properly protect your data. First, do you have multi-factor authentication set up for all of your email and sensitive data? This one's easy to check. When you access your email or your remote systems, are you prompted for more than just a password? For example, do you have to pull out your phone out and type in a code from an app that's on your phone? Backups might be a little bit harder, but the best way to know that you have good backups is to actually test them. But you don't have time to do that, so you should make sure the people who are responsible for your backups are testing them and reporting back to you. We recommend at least once a month. Okay, now that we've checked for having multi-factor authentication and backups, what about antivirus? How do we test for that? The easiest way is to go to the bottom right-hand corner of your screen and hover over the little icons. You're looking for something that says antivirus or endpoint protection. Next, do you have a written, documented breach response plan? If you are a business owner and you're not sure, you don't have one. Why? Because as a business owner, you have to be involved in the communications. And if you aren't aware of the plan, you will not be able to communicate on the company's behalf during the event. Now, if you can't answer yes to every one of the above questions, for sure, you will struggle to find an insurance provider to cover you, or you will have to pay a tremendous premium. Here's where we can help is to perform a complete assessment of your cybersecurity stack. You might be asking yourself, is this my job? Well, here's the thing. Keeping your company secure is everyone's responsibility. Even if it's just taking as simple steps I shared with you earlier this session. You can be thinking, I'm already protected. I have someone that does that. Are you absolutely sure you're completely protected from ransomware and hackers? If you'd love to be able to answer yes, I'm secure, I have a simple step for you. To get your IT department involved, this is going to be really up to you. If you'd like to know if they're actually doing, you could do an evaluation without engaging them. If you like to give them a chance to prepare themselves, then by all means, get them engaged. By the way, do you think hackers give your IT department a chance to prepare before they hack your network? I can assure you we do not need your passwords, and we won't be installing any software or changing any of your settings. We will send you a simple tool that you can run and analyze your network. Then we'll sit down with you and review the results in plain English. Finally, we'll give you some steps you can take to protect yourself and your data. What's the catch? Well, just a little one. We can't do this for everyone. We only have the ability to do 5 free assessments this month. And if beyond that, we will go and add you to a list, and we'll get to those as well. Again, our security team's on a mission to help protect 1 million people, and this is a free analysis as part of that mission. And you want to make sure you have all of your ducks in a row, or get the last list of items to improve. Some contact information for Craig and Pike and Orbis. Anyone has any questions?
I actually wanted to ask Ryan and Thomas, what are you seeing, or what are the trends that you're seeing in business email compromise? Because I know that's a big one on top of ransomware. And if you could go in and explain what business email compromise is, that would be great. Or Sean, you could answer that.
Sean, do you want to lead off with that, and we'll give you the kind of insurance underwriter perspective as a follow-up?
Sure. So business email compromise, we've probably seen it in the news with Shark Tank. There was the very nice lady where they got an email to wire off $400,000, a little over that, to Russia. It's basically to email out some money or wire some money away. It's mostly requests. It's usually going to be, they're looking for someone patient who's really is going to look for kind of an inopportune time too, like Mattel, when they got a brand new CEO, they were able to email on behalf of the new CEO to an accounting person to have permission to actually wire $1 million to a Chinese. Well, this all made sense. They were doing business with China. And so they wired that money, and the new accounting person, trying to ingratiate themselves with the new CEO, said, hey, I just want to let you know, I got that $1 million wired off for you. And he knew nothing about it. So that'd be a good example of that. And it doesn't happen often. It worked out that it was a Chinese holiday, and they worked with them, and they would actually get their money back. But that's not really common. But what does that look like from an insurance perspective?
Yeah, it's a clear focus, as noted in one of the earlier slides. Just do the statistics behind it. In large part, business email compromise is a method that leads into the actual loss or different types of losses at hand. So you can have business email compromise create an exposure base for an organization via a ransomware attack, and having the email system or any individual within that network on email being compromised, having their credentials compromised. To Sean's example, it could be the traditional funds transfer fraud or social engineering type loss. So Kelly, to your question, I think it's such a focus from the underwriter perspective because it's a proven method by bad actors to reap financial gains against organizations through the bad actors' fraudulent activity. And the top 3, as noted, is ransomware, the funds transfer fraud, social engineering, and then ultimately just accessing data, compromising data, and wreaking havoc within the organization at large. From an underwriter's perspective, one of the questions you'll see on the application that Sean had shown, that long list, is just one page of many in the current market we're living in, and the underwriter schemes that they're operating under. And some of the questions are going to be tied to employee training. to ultimately avoid and mitigate business email compromise exposures. At day's end, a lot of the underwriters see the human factor on the overall cyber exposure as the biggest vulnerability, that you can build out as much as you can on the IT side and put all the controls in place. And that is paramount and important, as Sean noted and can speak to. But there still needs to be at some level training, ongoing, regular training and different types of trainings implemented across the entire team within the organization at large.
Perfect, thank you. Outside of ransomware and business email compromise, what are the next largest risks for cyber that you're seeing?
Well, the biggest attack vector, I know Thomas and Ryan covered RDP. That was a real big one. So that's remote desktop protocol. That's where you would expose maybe your computer or your server to the internet through your firewall. You punch a hole and you say, allow that to get through. That is the most easiest thing for hackers to scan your firewall, see if that's open. Then they just throw a dictionary of usernames and passwords against it until they get into your system. So that's how they get in. And then once they're in, yeah, they're going to do all kinds of bad stuff, from like, stopping or deleting your backups. And it's not even immediate. Sometimes they just sit there and rest. I mean, the FBI did a study where, bad actors were in your network for over 200 days. And unless you have tools with detection and response, you're not really going to detect that. But email is definitely, the number one right now. I'm seeing close to about 93% of the attacks are coming in through an email, where you click on a Word document with a macro, or you click on a PDF, you click on something, and it either launches some sort of thread or a ransomware attack, or at least gets the bad guys in. So they've got like a beachhead, they're in your system, and they'll start exploring your network and start trying to move laterally. The other ones can be simple as just, we looked at a company where it was simple as, I'm not picking on, but it was just a receptionist where she just went to a website and she got a virus just by going to a website. They got in, they were able to actually get to a copier where they found that the copier is using the domain admin or the godlike rights into the server. Then they went over to the server with those credentials, because that was an easy hack to hack your copier. And then they were able to control the entire network, ransomware everything, lock everybody out. And, really kind of the things that's interesting. I know I talked about that law firm, they were out of business for 7 days, but it is pretty shocking in a breach response that the insurance company is going to come in for about 4 or 5 days to do that forensic analysis. In that time, you can't use your equipment, your data, that is locked up, so they can kind of figure out what happened. And then they're going to start that process. They have professional negotiators and they have professional people to help you try to get your data back, try to maybe negotiate a better deal than they're asking you for. But those are really like email is I can't stress right now. Email is probably the biggie. RDP just seems like an old thing. If anyone's still using that should definitely go away. That's the easiest of hacks. That's definitely going to happen.
These bad actors are no longer the people in a basement. They are fully operational criminal enterprises at this point. They have PTO and an HR team, just like we all do. Their sole purpose is to come in and try to extort and get as much as they can.
So employees are probably the single greatest threat that a business has for cybersecurity. Do the policies cover employee risk or them working from home? Ryan, Thomas, or Danielle?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. So there is no limitation in I will say, the leading cyber policies, because I know we were all chatting prior to the start of this, and Sean was sharing experience where an insured had kind of bolt-on or slimmed down coverage, and coverage wasn't going to apply appropriately to the extent of the loss that they were experiencing. So I throw the disclaimer on the front end that when we're talking about a contemporary market-leading comprehensive cyber policy, the answer to that is yes. There should not be any limitation to the location of the workforce, the network at large. It's open-ended definitions for networks and data under the control of the organization or the entity that's being insured. And that trickles down into the definition of insured that goes on an individual basis to executives, employees, et cetera. I would also say that a lot of these contemporary leading forms build in rogue employee coverage. So affirmative wording for the scenarios where you have an employee that's operating out of their right, responsibility, and authority within the system, protecting the data, and are potentially acting fraudulently in their own right. that would not be precluded from coverage under one of the forms that does have rogue employee confirmations in there.
And what about vendor management? Target got breached because an HVAC company happened, to get compromised. How do you make sure that a vendor won't, compromise our business?
Yeah, so insurance, these leading forms can provide protection for such. If you are contracting with a vendor on the IT side or otherwise, it's an extension of the business interruption loss that I alluded to in the first slide. It breaks down to business interruption loss on a first party basis for the organization, but then there's also dependent business interruption. That if the organization at large is actually contracted with an IT vendor or other vendor and their operations, network, or data is dependent upon that provider sustaining their services to our insured, and they suffer downtime or a cyber event, which trickles into our insured operations, you can be replenished via the cyber policy, via the dependent business interruption coverage. That being said, as the case with insurance, that's the kind of reactive approach, right? The event happened. How are you going to replenish or rectify the situation from a financial burden standpoint imposed on the organization? How do you mitigate it on the front end? To be more comprehensive to your question, Kelly, we are seeing more and more organizations now vetting out who their vendors are, what their security parameters are, and how conscious they are from the overall cyber exposure and their own hygiene itself. Tom and I were just on a large client call with the underwriters and the insured because we're going to the renewal cycle. And one of the focus was imposed on the insured from the underwriters in how are you vetting out your vendors? How proficient are they? If they're connecting to your system, what security features do they have in place? To just turn a blind eye to that and think that they're the expert without at least initiating the dialogue or asking questions, underwriters are becoming more cautious and drilling on insureds to do so.
And I have just a thought to add to that. The policies that Ryan's referring to are really standalone cyber policies. So they are written and very specific, and they offer a lot broader limits of coverage than what you're going to find as an endorsement or throw in coverage on your general liability policies. So you may think that you have, some cyber coverage there, and that may be true, but you definitely want to consider purchasing or looking into a monoline standalone cyber policy that's going to offer you the $1 million limits, the $250,000 limits, and all those things that Ryan just mentioned.
Yeah, I dovetail on that. Thank you, Danielle, in that there's actually case law and precedent that GL carriers are not required to respond to cyber losses. Now, there are certain scenarios where someone's found avenue because they have a crafty attorney, but we're talking about large firms that spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to secure that coverage because the overall loss was going to be in the seven figures. For small middle market size enterprises, a standalone policy, the difference between a standalone policy and cyber coverage you might find attached to another insurance policy like general liability is that those attachment coverages are often third party only. So all the first party coverages we're talking about, from the breach coach to the forensic analysis and team to privacy attorneys to the business income loss, data restoration, the ransomware coverage itself, that's usually not included. So to Danielle's point, standalone cyber it's night and day, the difference between trying to find coverage or avenue of coverage via another policy.
And then Thomas, Ryan, and Danielle, we have a question. Thoughts about biometric digital onboarding from an insurance perspective?
That's a very relevant topic. It kind of bleeds into cyber, but also progresses into some other executive line coverages that you find in the insurance marketplace, most notably EPLI. So a lot of carriers on the EPLI side are now adding biometric data exclusions because EPLI forms have had open-ended wording as it relates to employee privacy, and collecting biometric information would trigger coverage under that. Obviously, EPLI carriers policies, that's not the intent. They're not a privacy-driven policy. They're more harassment, discrimination, workforce-related issues. The cyber side is the appropriate avenue to secure coverage from an insurance perspective. That being said, again, given the advent and expanse of technology and more industries being reliant upon biometric information and collecting such for their workforce to enter the premises or what have you, It is being scrutinized from the underwriting side, and we're seeing some carriers apply sublimits or outright exclusions for biometric information and any privacy event that is associated to such.
And does a policy cover cloud software applications?
Yes. Yep.
Perfect. And the last question that I have right now, unless anyone else has any questions that came in, is in case of a breach, who should we contact?
If you have a cyber policy, obviously one of the first folks you contact is going to be the carrier to access that breach coach and all the vendors. I know, Sean, you would speak from your end. If you're a partner with any given organization, obviously they should be calling you first, right?
Fortunately.
Yeah. But Kelly, to the other point, I didn't want to overcome a misconception that we commonly run into is speaking to the cloud question is a lot of insureds who outsource some aspect of their overall IT endeavor and practices to a cloud provider, most notably, or say you're an organization that does collect payment card information and you outsource that to a payment processor. That doesn't void you from liability. It might diminish your overall scope of liability because they are the ones driving the ship, so to speak. However, case law shows on both federal and state sides that the organization at large is the data owner and therefore the first and last responsible for protecting such. So in the event that you are having data compromised and it is with the cloud provider, you could be triggering insurance policy coverage and incurring costs if you don't have it on your own right, just navigating, trying to find out who was at fault following a data breach. Was it your cloud provider? Was it yourself? And we always recommend having a cyber policy to cover those costs and get to the determination rather than paying out of pocket or trying to do it on your own.
Perfect. And one more thing. I always do that. Best takeaway for a business owner to do for cybersecurity insurance. What would you recommend from each of you?
Sean, you want to lead us off?
Well, I would think the best thing is, we were talking about this earlier. It's almost impossible to completely defend yourself, even if you had a massive budget just for cybersecurity. I mean, the NSA that had over $21 million, according to the Wall Street Journal, just in cybersecurity defense, got hacked, and then the Wall Street Journal reported on that, and then they got hacked. I mean, so. It's impossible if you're going to taunt somebody and they want to target you and go after you. The odds are fantastic; they're going to get in. We're as a cybersecurity organization, it is shocking what we get. The amount of passwords, the amount of information we get even in a mini pen test, let alone a full penetration test. We can definitely get 100% in. I would say the biggest defense is at least doing your best to try to stop that. To do your very best to have the right protections in, and if all those protections don't work, I mean, detection is one of the most important things in my world. Is can you detect if someone's in, and lastly, recover. Can you are your backups or your systems, can you restore your data, get it up and going in business? I mean, I've seen ransomware attacks where famously a hospital in Pasadena was out of business for 3 weeks, and yet Germany, two hospitals in Germany got the exact same ransomware attack. One did not have backups and were out of business for 3 weeks. The two in Germany we'll just restore, and they were up and going very quickly. So, try not to get to the point to calling your insurance company, but if you have to call an insurance company, I'm sure one of these people can explain that.
Yeah, I think from the cyber insurance perspective, if I'm a business owner, one of my bigger takeaways is I'm immediately analyzing my current cyber program and what does that entail. And I'm more than happy to sit down with anybody and explain things to them or talk about providing more of a robust cyber liability insurance program. The other thing is we have to take this seriously. I mean, I don't get to deliver good news to my clients right now because of the condition of the marketplace, but know that we are being as proactive as we can in shopping everything out to the carriers and making sure that the carrier that we are proposing to you is offering the best bang for your buck, so to speak, making sure that they are offering the best premium and coverages associated with this stuff. So if you have any questions, reach out and I'd be happy to help. Ryan, Tom, do you have anything to add into that?
I think you guys hit the nail on the head. The only thing I'd add is our recommendation would be is build out your team as much as possible. I don't mean the internal team, but your external team, and partnering with specialists like Sean, Kelly, like Danielle, who are willing to provide their value add for their respective area of focus and specialty. Because you don't have to do this alone. You shouldn't do this alone. This is a huge burden to take on for any organization, especially those on the smaller end that don't have the capital or resources to do so. And having professionals on the brokerage side, on the IT front, who can help navigate these waters, it's just in your best interest, and it ultimately saves you money at day's end.
Absolutely. Unless we have any other questions, I think that wraps us up. I want to thank Kelly, Sean, Ryan, and Tom for your time today and providing such valuable information that is very timely right now. So I think that concludes our webinar, and thank you guys.